Welcome to the Mike and Alison After Hours podcast with your hosts, Mshelah and Alison Haas, talking business with real business owners in the Mid-Atlantic region. Today's episode is sponsored by Advantage Industries. When you need business technology, get Advantage Industries to protect and promote your business. To learn more, go to www.getadvantage.com and schedule your first meeting to see if you qualify for a free network scan.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Mike and Alison After Hours. I am your host, Mshelah, and with me today is the always valuable and often vocal Alison Haas. Alison, how the heck are you today?
I am definitely vocal, Mike. Thank you. How are you?
Indeed.
Happy
I thought that was the
holiday
combination.
Yeah, I like it.
Valuable and vocal. All right, so folks, if you've been watching lately, you've noticed that we are adding some wrinkles. So we are definitely still talking to business owners, business founders, business leaders. We're still doing all of that, but we're starting to inject some subject matter experts. So a couple episodes back, we had Eric Williamson on emotional intelligence and his wonderful book, How to Work with Jerks. And we've gotten great feedback on that episode. And today we are continuing that evolution of the show. So we have on Matt McDarby. Now, Matt is many things to me. He is a friend. He is my fraternity brother. He has been a mentor to me. And for you folks watching and listening, Matt is the president of United Sales Resources, which is a sales leadership excellence company. And I'm going to let him talk about that. I love that he has that wrinkle unique to how he goes about his business. He is also an accomplished author. He has written multiple books, and we're going to get into the latest one because that is going to be our new giveaway. But before we do, if you want to win Matt's book, it's important that you subscribe to the YouTube channel or subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform. That could be iTunes, that could be iHeartRadio, that could be Spotify, that could be Stitcher, that could be Podbean, that could be TuneIn. You can listen on Audible. You can even ask that rascal Amazon Alexa to play the Mike and Alison After Hours podcast for you. So we are a servant of the people. Wherever you like to listen or watch, we are there. So let's get into the who, what, where, when, why, how. Alison, take it away with Matt McDarby.
Mike, you're on fire this morning. I'm listening
really?
and I'm
Too
like,
much caffeine.
I got to work on my introductory part. So Mike usually does it. As you can hear, he's very well versed. And then I do it sometimes and I'm like, Mike, help, you know? So anyway, Matt, it's awesome to have you here. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Wonderful to be here. Thank you.
And so this section is yours to tailor, right? So it can be somewhat personal, it can be professional, it can be, run the gauntlet from how you got started, how you became an author, your sales team. So tell us what you want the audience to know. This is your opportunity.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'll follow the who, what, where, when, why lead, right? Born and raised in the New York area, in northern New Jersey. I'm the youngest of five. And I am what they call a miracle baby. So I'm well younger than the oldest members of my family. And as a result, kind of grew up. I was born old, right? I was exposed to what my older siblings were doing, and was very serious, very at a young age, and I've always been that way. So, kind of an introvert, frankly. And for me to land in the sales profession, if you'd said this, 30 plus years ago, you're going to be in sales and you're going to lead sales organizations, I would have been like, who?
Yeah, right.
You talking to me? But so it was really out of necessity. When I graduated college, it was in a time of recession. I wanted to get into public relations. I'm a writer. It's one of my natural strengths, and I saw myself getting into that world. And I could have gotten into that world, only I had to do it for free. And because I had student loans and aspirations and things that I wanted to do, I had to go out and get like a real job that paid money. And it turns out the only people who were willing to pay me were people who wanted to sell things, lots of things. So I went to work for a company in the IT services business just down the road from where I grew up in northern New Jersey. When my sales career was launched, it was extremely uncomfortable for me for probably the first few years. Ended up being a team leader and then moved to the Washington, D.C. area where I am today to go and be with eventually my wife. We met at University of Delaware, fighting Blue Hens.
Awesome.
Yep.
My dad went there.
Yeah, we know. We always run into people, right? There's hens everywhere. So anyway, we settled in here in the DC area and took another sales job. And really, the first 8-9 years of my selling career, I was pretty average. I hit goals most years. Some years I didn't. Some years I exceeded. And it wasn't really until I was exposed to some really great professional salespeople that I even understood what good looked like. So, and I modeled myself after. There was a colleague of mine, a woman who is here in the DC area, who I watched and I learned how she thought about customers and how she planned meetings. I was like, wait a minute, that's different than what I was taught to do. And I grew up selling in an environment where selling was something you did to someone else, right? It was this adversarial, we're going to grind them down, or they're going to, by sheer force of will, we're going to sell them something. And yet I watched,
all by winging it as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. No planning. There was never any preparation. But watching this woman and how she went about her work, I was like, wait a minute, there's something different. And she was consistently the highest performer. So I started to get a whiff of what great looked like, and then left the company that I went to work for here in the DC area, and started my own business. Long story short, the road led me to work for a company called Huthwaite, which was founded by a guy named Neil Rackham. Neil Rackham was the creator of Spin Selling, author of the best books on consultative selling. And it was really in that environment where I cut my teeth and really learned what professional selling and what professional sales leadership looks like. So coming around full circle to what I do today, I worked in that environment. We were selling spin selling, essentially, to the largest global organizations that you can think of. And in the course of doing that, I noticed that some organizations got much better results than others. Same methods, same tools, same trainers, same consultants, same content. Yet one organization would get massive lift, another would get sort of so-so. What I realized over time was the difference wasn't necessarily the methodology or the sales process that they were applying. It was the degree to which their sales managers were really bought in and effective at their jobs, coaching, reinforcing the methods, right? Integrating. And I was like, wait a minute, if that's it, then we could sell these people virtually any model. And if they had an effective sales management layer, they're probably going to get some lift. So, and this was back in 2009, 2010. And at the time, there really wasn't anyone focused on the development of the whole sales manager. You could go out and buy a sales management training course, but it was going to be about how to coach spin or how to coach strategic selling. It was always just a sliver of the job. So I saw an opportunity to start a business that was focused on the development of sales managers, partnered with Huthwaite after finishing up as their VP of Enterprise Sales, left, and they were basically sending small to mid-sized customers my way, and my business was born. So that was 11 years ago. And now I focus my time exclusively on the development of people from frontline managers up to heads of sales, and I love it. It's so rewarding. You get to see people grow, and I coach people one-to-one. And it's great work. And we make a big impact on the performance of sales organizations because we're really focused on those sales managers who have the pivotal role. So that's me in a nutshell.
I love it. Thank you. And takeaways for me, which might plant a seed with Mike, might not. We'll see what he wants to talk about, but that you were introverted and ended up in this extroverted role, which to people listening, you don't have to be super extroverted to sell. And also that you sat through the discomfort, you waited it out, right? It wasn't like day one, you're like, not for me, right? You hung in there for a couple of years, and sometimes that's what it takes. And it sounds like a long time, but ultimately it's not. It just builds a foundational layer for you to continue to level up to. And then lastly, what's really hanging with me is that sales is a profession. And I don't know why that's really grabbing me this morning. I'm a sales professional. Mike's a sales professional. You are. But, I think of the people that walk around that give us a bad name. And this, obviously, I think I'm great. So, there's that caveat. But like, it really is a profession that has to be honed and tailored and tweaked and is constantly evolving. So thank you for that. So before I do pass you to Mike to talk about the things I just mentioned, how do we find you if the audience wants to get in touch with you, get a one-on-one, work with your company?
Best path is LinkedIn. Matt McDarby, MattMcdarby, LinkedIn. And then it's got my links to everything, the Amazon page, the author page, the company page, all of it. So that's pretty much the easiest place to start.
Perfect. And I want to hear about the authoring, so maybe that'll be in a segment too. So Mike, your turn. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Yeah, we will absolutely have all of your contact information available in the show notes for our viewing and listening audience. So Matt, you said something that I think is at the core of sales leadership. And Alison and I, we're both sales nerds. We read a ton of sales books. We've worked for good managers. We've worked for bad managers. It is my humble but vocal opinion that the majority of sales managers are mediocre at best, and most of them are on the god-awful side of things. And we had on the president of High Point University a few months back, and he said something that I think is at the core of what you do. He talked about, in order to manage hundreds and even thousands of people, that he can't do that by himself, but he's got a small core of about a dozen leaders on campus, and he called them his levers. And I love that because I think, because I read The Cadence of Excellence, and I can't wait to hear about the new book. I think that's the core of what we're getting at here, right? Yeah. Having those levers that you pull and maximizing, because you can't teach 1,000 people, but you can teach one person, right?
Right. Yeah, I think that's leading, right? It's a lot of us who end up in leadership roles get there because we've got a great, especially in sales leadership, we have a great track record of performance, right? And so I'm a great seller, and I'm going to teach, I'm going to show everybody else how to do that in this organization. The reality is you have very little control. Once you actually get into the job of sales management, you realize, shoot, I don't actually have any power whatsoever here, because these people are going to go out into the field and they're going to do the job however they choose to do the job. So the best thing that I can do as a leader of sellers in particular is, I can help them come to certain conclusions about how they need to go about doing the job. And I've got to be really conscious about how I do that. And so much of leading and coaching, I'll put it to you this way, and I've said this probably in conversations with you before, Mike, that think about situations where we've got to get some other human to take an action they otherwise wouldn't take, right? They've got to be, in order to do that, they've got to be motivated to take that action. They've got to see some reason to do the thing that they would not otherwise do. So they've got to come to a conclusion that there's value in it for them to do the thing that they wouldn't do on their own, right? How do we get them to see that as adults? We have dialogue, we ask them questions, we help them come to those conclusions. What does that sound like to you? Right? It's selling, right? We're actively selling to our people as leaders every day, or we should be, which is more about pulling people in the direction of the right conclusions versus pushing and telling. And that's what I mean. Like, if the three of us were working on a team together and I said, look, this is what we're trying to achieve, this is why it's important, now go out and this is how I need you to do it, there's a really good chance that you're going to go off and and do it however you see fit. And I don't have a great deal of control over how you do the work. So if I take a little bit of a different approach, And I'm looking at you as the kind of, he called them levers, maybe, change agents, whatever they are, right? The people that need to go out and execute the work in the field. I need you to see, and ultimately come to your own conclusions about how the task needs to be performed. Now, I'm going to give you a process. I'm going to set some expectations about the methods that you should use, and I'm going to coach you over time so you can become more effective at applying those methods, assuming I know I've identified what the right methods are, right? But it's all about me equipping you to get out into the field and drive our message to customers and partners and whomever we're speaking with. So, so there's so many parallels between leading and selling. That's why, the coaching of leaders is something I love, because really, even though it's a lot of what I do is coaching, I'm influencing the influencers, and it's fun. I get really jazzed when I see people realizing something.
The aha moments.
Yeah,
Yes.
the problems they didn't recognize, or a new way to get something done, or a creative way of thinking about getting an outcome, or whatever, right? And that's really the thing that gets me excited about the work that I do. And for every sales leader watching and listening, he or she, I hope, would have the same sort of fulfillment, right? You get somebody to see something they just wouldn't have seen on their own. That's cool, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely love that dynamic. When I work with people, I just finished actually coaching a young man who had never sold before. He's going into his father's company, and his father said, I think I want you to be the salesperson. And he's like, okay. So you have a lot more of those aha moments with the fresh ones, but
Right.
I'm sure you faced this challenge, whether it's a grizzled sales leadership veteran, or which I'm also sure you've seen this dynamic, is a smaller business, a 20, 30, 40 person company that doesn't have a sales structure.
Right.
But they're thinking about hiring a salesperson. And that salesperson needs some sort of vision or guidance. And that often falls on the owner of the company. And they are usually woefully under-equipped from a sales perspective to do that.
Sure.
And I'm saying that because so many of our listeners are business owners, and they either, I had a very good friend who ran a very successful IT company for over 25 years. And he and I sat down one day just to shoot the breeze. And he was telling me about his troubles trying to keep a sales professional.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, you're not a salesperson. Of course you're having trouble. He's like, what are you talking about? I've closed hundreds of deals in my 25 years. I'm sure you have. That doesn't make you a sales professional. You're an IT guy that happens to sell, or you're a business owner that happens to sell. And so I would love to get your thoughts on that dynamic, because salespeople have a mindset that is not necessarily in harmony with business ownership.
Yeah. Well, a lot of principals in small and mid-sized businesses that have grown over time do, like, I'm the ultimate seller, like I'm the sage, I can teach everyone how to do it. The thing that they forget that's different about their job now, especially if it's an established business, is like, hey, I'm John Smith or Jane Brown, I'm the president or CEO of fill in the blank, right? And people pick up the phone.
Yep.
Right.
For somebody.
So much of selling today is it's not even like the differentiation and value creation we talk about as the sale develops. It's just getting access in the first place. Just talking to somebody who has a problem you can solve, or is interested in the opportunity you can create for their business.
Bingo moment. Love it.
When you're a professional seller, I'm not the CEO. I'm calling. My title is account executive or regional sales manager. They see that, and the customer's like, no, I'm just gonna, no thanks.
I'm
good. Right? CEO, president. I think there's a huge what's the blind spot for principals and owners, because they think, well, all you have to do is just pick up the phone and you're just immediately going to get access. It doesn't work that way. When you're the first person hired to carry the bag for that company, or you're the 10th or the 20th, it's a broad sweep of the brush, but a lot of business owners are not professionally trained sales managers. They don't know.
Most of them are not.
Most are not. Yeah. Yeah. And maybe, by most I mean 98% of them are not professionally trained sales managers. Why do I say that? Because there really aren't that many professionally trained sales managers out there, even today. And the ones that are professional sales managers working in mid-market to large enterprises. Typically, they're not running small businesses. So, they don't really have the depth in motivating salespeople. They think, let me just set some crazy goal. That's some crazy stretch goal, and that'll be the thing. We're all going to be united and working toward that objective. And the salespeople look at that number. They're like, yeah, but that's crazy. Like, we can't even get access. I can't even get people to call me back, right? You're saying we're going to grow 10x in 3 years, and you're not changing the business. You're not giving me any resources. It doesn't, So there is a disconnect between the principals, the people that found these companies, and professional sales managers who understand the day-to-day challenges of a seller and how bloody hard it is, frankly, 2021, 22, because it's not getting any easier to get customers' attention and to get access and to build pipe. It's getting harder. And I think that's probably the single biggest area where there's a disconnect between the principals, owners of businesses, and the salespeople they hire.
Thank you for acknowledging what we deal with on a day-to-day basis. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Been there. Yeah.
I think you just made a point that if our audience doesn't get anything else out of this conversation today, and I'm sure they did, it's that this is not an easy process. And the people that found a business, man or woman, young or old, right out of college, right when you're thinking about retiring, one of the main reasons that person founded that business was they have a particularly unique skill to that sector and that industry. And because of that, it makes them really unique. And it's that uniqueness that people buy.
Right.
So from that perspective, it makes selling easier. And I want to qualify it. I don't think there's actually anything easy about selling.
Right.
But you'll get that passive, Bob, I'd love to have you do this side project for me. And they get enough of those and they go, well, geez, I can start my own business. And things are nice at the beginning. And then a year or two later, a couple of those customers are no longer in business, so they can't buy from them anymore. And the funds from the projects that they spooled up are now gone. And we're like, okay, well, now I got to go get new clients. How do I do that?
Yeah.
And they have no idea. They have none. And so they'll go, oh, I'm gonna hire Alison. She's a sharp salesperson.
Sure
And
is.
Alison hears it and goes, yeah, I'll come on board. And then she steps in and goes, oh my God, this is an absolute horror show. It's amazing that you've sold anything. In the past, you have no processes. You what do you expect me to do? So I'm guessing one of the many things you must have to do when you're working with a client is help them develop a sales process. And that incorporates the operations and the billing and handing off from sales to all of that. So, these last couple of minutes, talk a little bit about that, because I'm sure that must make you pull your hair out.
Yeah, well, it's also one of the reasons I work with mostly middle market companies these days. Middle markets are large because they've got some maturity and a lot of that stuff is established. Now, we may need to refine or change those sales processes, but that's a pretty common thing in smaller organizations, that it's especially where the principal has been, the owner has been the principal seller for a long time, and things like you mentioned sales process, but I even think like defining our offerings.
Yes,
like having that, not, and I'm not even talking about like marketing slicks, but having a clear sense of like, what does our product or service portfolio look like, And they're
Other
like,
than,
well,
you know what, we can do that. I'll charge you X
exactly.
for it.
Yeah. No, we've done that 15 times, and the salesperson they hire is like, well, where is the story about that? Like, where is that? Right? It's a very common thing with smaller organizations that they don't have the operational maturity or the discipline to write those things up. They have no product or service portfolio strategy at all. Why? Because they can rely on the subject matter expertise of the founder and maybe a couple of other people they've have been there for a long time, but everybody else is in the dark, right? So yeah, that is when I work with when I pull a team together, or if it's just me, when we're working with a small organization, one of the very first places that I look is sales process, because if there isn't a clearly defined and, by the way, buyer focused sales process that's encouraging the right behavior, both within the sales organization, but sales operations and solution architecture and whatever other supporting functions there may be, and that's something we have to define. Why? Because in the absence of that, there's no real expectation about how we're supposed to interact with clients as they go through their buying process. So, call it the buying journey, there's a million, ways people describe it today, but it's basically, let's assemble a sales process that ensures that we're meeting our clients where they are and trying to add and create some value.
Meeting their clients where they are. Love it.
Yeah, and it's because our job, unless you're selling a super transactional kind of a widget, or it's a simple as a service kind of a sale, unless it's like that, where you're just taking all the friction out of the buying process, then your job as a seller is to try to add value, create value where you can. And there are certain moments when you can do that. Having a process that reminds you, oh, this is where the client is the thing that should trigger the right behavior. And if there isn't something like that in place, I'm hoping the people are listening are like, oh, shoot, we don't have that. Then hire somebody who can help you to build that process and define it clearly. Otherwise, your seller or sellers are kind of rudderless. Every opportunity.
They're gonna grow frustrated. They're gonna leave.
Yeah.
Wasted your investment.
Yeah, they're not going to be successful is the bottom line.
So Matt, this has been a whole lot of fun. Your last couple minutes, you gotta tell us about the new book. I'm so excited.
Sure. Yeah.
Title, when is it coming out? How do we get it?
Well, it is going to be officially released on Amazon in the second week of September. So
by the time this is published, it'll be live. Awesome.
Yep, absolutely, and you'll be able to find it on Amazon. The title of the book is "The Divine Comedy of Sales: Sales Manager's Guide to Virtuous Leadership." And the idea is simply this: that if you think about, and everybody listening, you can think about, like Mike, you said this earlier, right? We've all had. Some of us have had great sales managers, and we've had some other managers who aren't so great. If you think about those managers who were really effective leaders, and think about how they did their job and how they thought about their work, my argument is those were the virtuous leaders. And I use the framework of the 7 deadly sins at the beginning in the introduction of the book: pride, envy, ire, sloth, avarice, gluttony, and lust. And they're opposing virtues, right? Humility, goodwill, patience, diligence, right? And so forth.
That's fantastic.
I tell stories. I tell stories of real. This isn't Matt waxing poetic for 100 and something pages, right? This is stories about real leaders who get the best out of their teams or their whole organizations. How do they do that? They demonstrate the virtues and how they do their work. And it's never just one, it's always a combination. It's like, there's several virtues at play. When you watch Ken Napolitano at Wheels Up do his job, you would notice the hallmark of how he thinks about his role and how he treats his people are guided by a few of these key virtues. Right? So the main message is, if you're going to lead people, especially salespeople, pay really close attention to the sins and the virtues, right? Know which, what does your behavior, what message does that convey to your people, to your customers, to your partners? And let's make a conscious choice to do better. And then at the end of each chapter, there's you remember the start, stop, continue device at the end of the Cadence of Excellence chapters, each one of them. And it's basically a challenge. What are you going to change? What are you going to do differently, Miss Sales Leader or Mr. Sales Leader?
I love it.
How are you going to apply this virtue and do your job more effectively? That's it.
Well, Alison, your parting thoughts for Matt before we say goodbye to him today. This has been a fantastic episode, so thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I've written down a couple words. You have a lot of buzzwords. Equip, maturity, discipline, refine, behavior, friction. And they're just, I have light bulbs going off. So I appreciate that. And this was fun. This was a really constructive conversation. Again, for our audience, there's more than one way to do it, and there's more than one demeanor, personality to end up successful in this environment as a leader, as a sales professional, as whatever. So thank you for your insights. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Matt, thank you so much for being on Mike and Allison After Hours. We hope to see you again very soon.
Thank you both. It was great.
Take care. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.
So wow, that was fun. I knew it was going to be fun. And again, I've known Matt for a long time, and I read his first book and absolutely loved it. And when I heard the divine comedy of sales leadership, I think that's hysterical.
And it is a comedy, right? I mean, it's a bunch of we're just all so human, right? And I think, like, I'm sincere in the buzzwords, equipping people to do their job, right? Everyone's going to have their own style that aligns with their personality, but equip them to deal with objections and real life blunders and boulders and things. I love that word maturity, right? Of an organization, but a maturity as a sales professional. That's just such a great visual for someone that's never sold before, be it the introvert like Matt or someone like me. Well, I'm a fake extrovert, but I'm a dominant personality, and I'm not afraid to go out and do, right? I'm a doer. So sales is a natural profession for me. But yeah, I love that. He's a smart guy. He and very refined.
Yeah, I think my favorite thing that I take away from that is something that you and I come across every day is selling to our audience. And if I haven't said this to you before, I'm dumbfounded, frankly, that when you look at the prospective sales pool, it comes in 3 chunks. Chunk number 1 is maybe 20% of the market. And those are the people that will always buy from you. And then on the other end of that spectrum is another 20% chunk of people that will never buy from you. And then you have this segment in the middle that's about 60% of the marketplace. So it's a substantial number that are open to be sold. So as a sales professional, you want to identify, well, which bucket does this prospect fall in as quickly as possible?
Yep.
So that you don't waste time, because you don't want the people that are never going to buy them. You don't want to waste time on them.
Yep.
And that's okay. They don't have to buy from you. They can go buy from somebody else.
Yep.
You certainly want to identify that first 20% as quickly as possible, because they tend to be faster and easier. But the work comes in that 60% one. And, from my industry, for IT and cybersecurity, that's where I have to spend the majority of my time. And I know you can appreciate this statement. People that just don't get it. And I had a very entertaining email thread with a prospective client last week. He's a government contractor. He owns a government contracting business, I should say. And all the right criteria. The man had never heard of cyber maturity model certification before, which I'm learning a lot of people haven't. That's okay. So that's a big part of my job, right? Is educating people.
Yep.
And at first he said we wouldn't be a good fit.
Mm.
So I emailed him back. I said, Bruce, your company, I looked at your website. Your company does a lot of work with the DoD. He goes, yes, we do. I said, okay. Then you have to do cyber maturity model certification. And he said, okay, well, why don't you give me a quote on what the training would cost for a company of my size? I said, it's not training. I said, it's a 130 step process so that you can do business with the DoD in the future. I said, and it's a requirement. Every government, and I keep hammering that away at people. Like, this is a requirement.
Yep.
If you want to keep selling to the DoD, you have to do this. Now, you don't have to do it right this second, but you do have to start working on it, because
Yep.
it's going to take about a year to get through all of it. And you're going to want to evaluate your vendors. And he writes back to me and says, all right, well, what would the price look like for a company the size of mine? I said, well, we really do need to sit down and discuss this. I can't just send you a quote. And he's like, we would not be a good fit. And I said, Bruce, I'm not sure where, I said, my apologies. I'm not sure where the disconnect here is. But, and I basically wanted to say to this guy, are you just thick?
Yep.
There's no other way for me to tell you. And I said, you don't have to do business with me. That's absolutely true. You do have to do something.
Or not. He doesn't, right?
Well, here's the thing. If he doesn't, then he's no longer a government contractor. Period. End of story.
Yeah.
And I know you as an HR professional, you come across that all the time. People are like, we don't need you. Like, well, maybe needs not the right word. However, would you like to not be sued? Then we should probably, because that's a big part of your work is assessing risk. And, so talk a little bit about that, what the HR world, educating people.
Well, it's funny. I'm listening to you and I think I've lost I've matured, we'll go back to that word, in my qualifying and disqualifying process. So, prospecting is the biggest part of the job. It's something we have to do every day. There are reps in the world that get leads all the time. Good for them. I'm not one of those. I get them sometimes, but I have to find them. So in my diligence, in my qualifying process, when I come up with a Bruce and I'm engaging, I disqualify them because what I want to do is I want to work with someone that wants to work with me and who's open to being worked with. And so, yes, I educate and I talk about HR as a strategy. People are your greatest asset, but HR is really complex because it is tactical and reactive in the day to day. But then there's also like, if we put some initiatives in place, some workflows, some processes, take care of the risk aspect, your bottom line increases. And some people stay to hear that and some people don't. And so I think as a professional, being able to disqualify and save my energy for those that want to work with me. And sometimes it's not immediate, right? Sometimes we think it'll be a great fit and it just doesn't end up working. Other times I'm surprised that we get through the process and then they end up a client. I'm like, damn, I didn't see that coming, right? But I gave them the time and the courtesy and the education as you shared. So what's coming up now, we're entering our busiest season of the year. That last quarter, heading into the first of the year, the last couple months of the year, it's a natural time to start thinking about change because we're humans and we've evolved to embrace new years, literally. So our business really does about 65 to 80% of the year's business in this last quarter. And so, like I texted you.
Why do you think that is?
One, right? January 1st, right? So quite literally people are like, okay, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it now. We're going to rip it off. Everybody mentally thinks about change that time of the year. For us too, it's a clean W-2, taxes start over, a lot of calendar year deductibles start over. It's just more organic in alignment with other processes.
Reasons to it. Interesting.
Yeah. So other people too, like they have now 9 to 10 months of experience of what worked and what didn't in this year, right? And so now we can start to think about applying new ideas and new strategies. But yeah, we do a ton of business this part of the year. So I had texted you, I'm gonna die a millionaire, but I'm gonna probably die, but I'm probably gonna die a millionaire, if what the pace that's already ensued for me continues, which is a blessing. I've worked really hard to get here, but yeah, people are more apt to change heading into this time of year, and it becomes more urgent because deadlines come up, they get a renewal that was a little bit scary. Or they're just sick of having to budget for things that has no predictability, right? But for me, you know, that qualifying aspect, but respecting people and still giving them the opportunity to tell me, no, it really isn't a fit. But then me in turn respecting them and saying, you know what, I hear you. Let me know when you need a resource and I'll be here for that.
Yeah, I want to pick at the corner of something that you said, because the more you and I talk about our respective industries, the parallels between the two just enthrall me. I think it's fascinating how we're selling two very different things, but so many of the reasons we're selling them are in alignment. It really is fascinating to me. You
Yeah.
said that HR is complicated. And I just said that for CMMC, there are 130 requirements. Now, some of you listening go, I'm not a government contractor. Okay, fine. Let's go with the easier one. Every business should follow the National Institute of Standards and Technology's 800-171 cybersecurity policy guidelines. Everybody. NIST 800-171 for short. So that one has 110 control requirements to it. Every single one of those has an if-then to it. So for example, if Alison is the president of the company, then we must implement the following 6 things for her technology. If Mike is the office manager of the company, then we must implement these 4 things for his technology. They may not all be the same things. The 6 things I do for yours may be different than the 4 things that are done for mine. So there's this if-then that just blows out the 110. So when we talk to clients, we build a roadmap, which I know you guys do too. We go, all right, over the next 12 months, here's what you can expect. Here's when we're going to do it. Here's how we're going to do it. And by the way, Mr. or Mrs. Customer, we're going to need your help, because there are things that are subtly unique about your company that make your company your company. And not so subtle are your people. Like if you were to sell your services to 2 companies, let's say 2 law firms. Both law firms have the same number of attorneys. They have the same number of assistants. They have the same head count. Let's say it's even the same ratio of men and women. Let's say they're in the same building. I mean, these 2 law firms are as similar can be. It's a different path for both of them, because one has things in place that the other doesn't, and vice versa. And because of that, the road that you have to take the customer on, the road that I have to take the customer on, they're similar. So we have a model. You know, one of the values of what we do is we've identified, okay, this is how we go about supporting our clients, but there's still going to be those delta variants. There's going to be those changes that make the process unique to every end client. And I don't think a lot of customers understand that when they talk to a salesperson, just how involved what you do is, how involved what I do is. But to the other side of that, we're taking away a lot of the pain. We're taking away the complication. We're taking away the confusion. They need to be involved. But that's the point, right? I know that's, one of your goals anyway, when you talk to clients.
Well, and I think too, also as sales professionals, we fail to realize the nuances with different businesses, right? And it's what Matt said, we meet them where they are, right? We can't just show up and expect them to understand the process or to have a process or to appreciate the way of doing things. So we have to we're tasked with having to meet them where they are and guide them and make it their idea, right? which is why the two law firms would be so different, even if they are very, very similar. Because if one is mature and has processes, but the other doesn't, plus they have their own cultures, they have their own leadership team. And so like that friction that he talked about is that, right? We meet them where they are without abandoning our process. But that's, I think, a lot of sales professionals, especially coming from a transactional background, fail to meet that. Like, no, this is how it goes from A to Z. And it's like, nah, not really. There's a lot of different detours between A and Z, right? So yeah, Matt really got me thinking this morning, and it just always encourages me to do better and enhance my professionalism.
Yeah. And certainly thought-provoking for me as well. And I cannot wait to read The Divine
Yeah, I'm gonna have to
Comedy
get that too.
of
It
Sales
sounds awesome.
Leadership. So for our listening and viewing audience, be sure to go to Amazon and get a copy. Of course, you can win a copy. It's really easy. All you got to do is subscribe to our YouTube channel or subscribe to our podcast on whatever platform you enjoy, and leave a comment. Leave a comment. That's all. Say, hey, great episode. And it doesn't have to just be the episode we did with Matt. Go back and leave a comment on one of the other 29 other episodes Alison and
Drop
I
an
have
emoji.
done.
You don't even have to have listened. Just pretend, right?
Yes. Excellent point. Drop an emoji. Why not? And you'll be entered for a chance to win a copy of Matt's brand new book. We'll be giving that away in November. So for Alison Haas, I am Mike Shelah. Thank you for watching and listening to Mike and Alison After Hours podcast. And remember, people helping people. Powerful stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining Mike and Alison After Hours. Tune in next time for another great business owner sharing valuable industry ideas. Want to be a guest on our show? Contact us at answers@getadvantage.com.